5.
5. Chris, the topic we will be discussing today is how do you handle aging and different ages in your tabletop games?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be young forever. Hello, and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running role-playing games. I'm Chris Salzman.
And I'm Andy Rao.
Andy, you made us a new table, and you asked me right before we jumped on, "Hey, do you want it to be a mystery?" I'm like, "Yes, absolutely." So I'm excited, excited for this
Okay.
topic. I have given it zero thought.
I also have not given them thought, so I don't know
Yeah.
what we're going to discuss, but I think but those are often our most fun discussions, quite
Yes.
frankly.
Yeah.
So,
I think it'll be really good.
yeah.
Yeah. So you also mentioned before we jumped on that you had something that you wanted to a book that you've been reading, right?
I've been rereading a science fiction novel. It's I read it a couple of years ago, and then the book club I'm in picked it to read, so I'm rereading it again. It's a novel called A Memory Called Empire
Mm,
by Arcady Martine. I might be butchering her name.
okay.
Are you familiar with this one?
No, I haven't heard of that author or this book.
It lives in the same space as like Anne Leckie's
Hmm.
novels. The reason I mention it here is because it does have some of my GMing gears spinning. It is a political space opera. So
Okay.
there's relatively little action. The main character is the ambassador to like a massive space empire that's modeled after Byzantium.
Okay.
And so she represents a minor state on the edges of this empire that feels the pull of the empire as sort of the center of civilization, but also wishes to retain its sort of identity and independence to some
Mm,
extent.
okay.
That's a rich, very historical sort of scenario. I've just been interested because I've never run an RPG like a purely political game,
Yeah.
and this is 85% just politics, and the tent scenes are all conversations with people and who got a clever insinuation in, or
Mm,
who got the upper hand through some sort of wordplay. I really enjoy it. It's a good book. I recommend it. But it just made me realize that's a tradition of fantasy and science fiction literature, and it has never really come up much in the games I've run, except as isolated in the campaign. There might be one scene where you appear in the king's court and have a
hmm.
political thing or whatever. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious, have you ever run a game that was, or played in a game that was more based around social interaction and politicking than it was about traditional adventuring?
Yeah, it comes up every once in a while. So the games that I play that Matt Wilson runs, like I mean, he's a history buff and he likes politics as well. Or I don't know, liking politics. That's maybe not exactly what he likes, but he enjoys thinking about politics. Yeah. So I mean, we've had
Although
some.
right now, no one enjoys thinking about
No,
politics.
no,
But
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
but
yeah.
carry on.
But we must and we must endure.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it comes up, quite a bit in there. Yeah. So I mean, I think he also likes running action games too, right? So like, there's a lot of action. Very rarely do we kind of sit down and we're just like having long political conversations around a table or anything like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
it does come up. I find those are hard for me to play in, hard for me to run in, like those sort of extended social situations, because like I just don't feel like I'm personally sort of adept at that in real
Yeah.
life. Like I will, not oftentimes, but sometimes I'll kind of get out of a meeting or something and ask someone like how it went, and they'll mention something like, "Oh, I missed that entirely." Like I missed this subtext that was happening. But that's fine. Yeah. So it's something that's interesting to me. I mean, what I'm surprised to hear is, so like it sounds like you're enjoying that book, right? Is it really just kind of people mingling around talking to each other talking to each other? Are you getting kind of like, do they go off on by themselves and kind of like come up with a strategy and come together? Like, yeah, I'm just
It really is. And I don't think it's a book for everyone. Like, it's
mhm.
kind of a slow burn. I mean, so I just finished a chapter. It was a big, long, exciting chapter, and it was just attending the emperor's ball.
Oh, cool.
And
Yeah.
the main character has like maybe, 3 or 4 different social interactions that are like
Mhm.
super laden with portent, in
Yeah.
the course of the banquet. As an old person,
Yeah.
speaking of our topic,
Yeah.
aging, the games I grew up with, you know, had these incredibly elaborate structures for running adventure and action scenes, right?
Mhm.
Because I don't know how to fight a gnoll. There's ample rules in all these games I played to do that. I also don't know how to like politic at the king's court, but
Yeah.
at least in the games, you know, I was playing when I was younger, they had all these rules for combat, and then everything else was just kind of like, well, just wing it, like just
Mhm.
role play this out, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I know there's been a large number of games over the last 20 years, I'd say, that have tried to expand the space of the rules to kind of encompass social interactions as well.
Mhm.
But with only a handful of exceptions, nobody goes as rule heavy with social scenes as they do with combat scenes. I
Mhm.
realize there's exceptions. So if you're
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
thinking, but well,
Yeah.
what about game X?
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
And I'm a little surprised that it's never bled into like the big mainstream games like D&D. Plenty of trends and ideas have bled into D&D, Pathfinder, the biggies, right? But
Mhm.
there still is no, you know, there's like no skill or feat tree or anything like that, or initiative round process for conducting a debate
Yes.
in
Yeah.
the king's court, right? Would you enjoy seeing that stuff in the D&D rules, or would you feel like that's not what the rules are here to do?
Yeah, I mean the rules would have to be set up for it. So the like the game that I'm playing in right now, we our character sheets, right, we have a health score and a morale score, right? Right, it's like HP and morale.
Yeah.
Sort of our two pools of like if either of these get to zero, like you're knocked out of like yeah, out of the story basically. And
Yep.
so like morale can take a hit by someone browbeating you or, convincing you of something, right? Something or like yeah shaming you or like whatever, right? So like there's some like built-in rules for that in this system, and I think there's a lot of systems where they kind of hint at it, but like D&D doesn't give you a lot of like mechanics to really work with there. Like you were saying, it just sort of all will come down to like you do a persuasion roll, right? Like
Right.
there's a
Exactly.
contested persuasion roll, like right, like so there's just like a single roll there versus I think what really happens in some of these like whatever courtroom or banquet scenes is like you're going back and forth, right? Like so
Yeah.
there's if you were to really do it, there'd be lots of little rolls as you're as you're going through, or maybe some sort of like I don't know, you gamify it in some other way.
You maneuver to give yourself an advantage. Like if like in a combat, you're moving around the map and in such a way to set things up to
Hmm.
make your attack more effective or something like that. But
Yeah.
there's no real tactics to social interaction in like say D&D.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like, I mean, I think that's probably okay. I mean, I think like if I'm reaching for fantasy combat game, like that's what I want, right? And so, like you mentioned, there's tons of other like indie RPGs that are exploring the space a little bit more. But there isn't like one that I know of that it's like everybody has coalesced around and said like, yes, this is the one if you want to do social social interaction.
Yeah.
Because I think there's just like there's different varieties of that too. Like I'm thinking about like so you can have like this politics stuff, but I'm also thinking about like Jane Austen or Bridgerton, right? Like those kinds of social interactions too, right? Where it's like it, some of the mechanisms might be the same of like you're talking to people, you're pulling them off to the side to like get them separated from their advisors, like right, there's like all this stuff that can kind of happen, but like your outcome can be so different that it feels wrong. If you were playing like a Jane Austen game, you'd probably want one of those skills to be flirting or something like
Yeah.
that. Where if you're playing like a more politics heavy game, you might be like I don't know, power or like global knowledge or I don't know, right? Like you can have a ton of these different mechanics. But yeah, so it's like I think you'd need a system that can kind of abstract some of those individual like abilities and levers that you might have in a social interaction, and like then also apply some sort of like hit point based thing to it or some sort of score score
Yeah.
system. Yeah, and I could see it working pretty well. Too like if you'd have to, I mean, I think there has to be a system, someone has to kind of think it through. It sounds like both you and I are not the sort of GMs who are like I really need this in my life, but I know that
Right.
there's a lot of
Right.
people who are like absolutely yeah.
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 Yeah, and if you do have a system that does this really well, or if
Hmm.
you've run a game that was just all romance in the
Hmm.
Emperor's court or something like that, I'd actually love to hear about that,
Yeah.
what you used and then what the experience was like.
Yeah, there's right, like, this reminds me of, Final Fantasy VI, right? So, again, right, I'm gonna reference a 30-year-old video game now, but yeah, there's a really cool scene, right, so most of that game is, like, combat and stuff, but there is a really cool scene where you, as the rebels, have, gotten an audience with the Emperor, like, you got an audience with the big bad guy, right, and, like, it is like a sit down at a banquet sort of scene, and so he's like asking you questions and you get a score based on how you answer the questions, right? Like, like, are you going to ally yourself with him, or are you just like telling him that he's awful, right? Because like at that point of the game he has enough power that he could just kind of crush you right there if he needed to. Yeah, but it's like it's a fun scene because it's such a sequence break from the mechanics that you're used to in that game. Like all of a sudden you're having a conversation where you're getting these dialogue choices that like they matter in like as much as dialogue choices could matter in like kind of that era of
Yeah,
gaming. Yeah, and so it's like it really puts a lot of importance on the story in that moment because like if you do really well you can get, I think you end up getting some items and stuff like that, right? Like so there's some sort of mechanical advantage to you in combat later on,
yeah,
but also just in terms of the story, if you're putting yourself in the place there, it's like, oh, this is interesting to think about. Like I'm not just mashing buttons through the story or to get to the next combat. It's like the game is asking you to sort of slow down and think about this in a different way.
yeah,
Yeah, like that's always it's stuck with me, right? Like I played that as a young kid, right? And that stuck with me as like a really good example of like, oh, like the video games can kind of tell these unique stories, and same thing with tabletop games, right?
yeah,
You can just abstract it out, like, I don't know, yeah, you go to the Emperor, you make your one persuasion roll, and then you move on. But yeah, I
yeah.
think there is definitely something that you can do do in that
When
space.
I was
Yeah.
reading that big Emperor's Ball scene, I was thinking, like, how would I run this?
Hmm.
I think I would have like 8 clocks,
Mm-hmm.
like it's a big ball. There's like 300 people there,
Yeah.
and there's like 8 clocks more than you can go engage with. So you have to make strategic choices about which ones you care about, and then here's a clock of like convince this person to change the trade policy towards your homeland. Here,
Yeah.
this group of people, you can just establish rapport with them, which might pay
Hmm.
dividends down the line. Or in this one, you need to avoid being embarrassed by a rival or something,
Hmm.
and using some sort of blades clock system to make those a little bit more than just like a pass fail persuade
Yeah.
roll.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know, it got me kind of thinking, and the games I have in my near future don't really have a lot of space for this kind of scene, but
Hmm.
but maybe I'll see if I can like try and squeeze one in somehow.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I like as you describe that, that sounds really cool. If there's, I don't know, like you could even if there's sort of six clocks that they know about and two that they don't don't that are
yeah, yeah,
happening, and then there's sort of one hidden clock that's off in the servants' quarters if they choose to go go look at it. But I mean, you could set up a lot of the upcoming story that way too, just like yeah, based on how things go. Yeah.
yeah. It could be really fun with like a with a diverse group of characters, right?
Hmm.
Like you go and do the drinking contest with that because
Hmm.
you've got the high constitution, or
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
and you go flirt with the prince
Hmm.
because you know I think it could be a lot of fun. But
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
all right.
All right. So real quick, so I've been reading a book called The Westing Game by
Oh yeah.
Ellen Raskin, I think her name is. Yeah, Ellen
Yes.
Raskin. Yeah. So I hadn't heard of this book at all. We brought it up it came up in one of our group chats, and like I was just like, this sounds like my sort of book. So I've been reading about it. But I mean, talk about like a book. I, I don't know exactly how you describe it. It's almost like a murder mystery, but like
Yeah.
all the characters are sort of trying to figure out the murder too, as you're trying to figure it out as well. But it's just like this fascinating group of characters, right? Like again, talking about like our topic at hand about aging and stuff, it's like this multi-generational cast of characters all sort of dealing with their own stuff while also trying to figure out how to solve this, like who murdered this wealthy, well, millionaire. Like these days he'd be a billionaire, right? This wealthy
Yeah.
millionaire who's going to leave one of them money if they can figure out like who did it. Yeah, so I'm enjoying it quite a bit. It's been a little slow going just because of my life life at the moment, but like yeah, it's really good. So I'm glad I
Am
picked
I
it up.
dreaming it, or did they just find like an unpublished sequel or something to that?
You might not be dreaming that. That does sound familiar, but I
Okay.
don't quote me on it.
Maybe I am dreaming it too.
Yeah.
So okay.
Yeah, so it's good. But yeah, that has me thinking a lot about like the the book. I'm maybe halfway through it, and there's sort of just like one set of clues that everybody's been given, but everybody also like but because everybody's competing against each other, no one wants to share clues. So like you as a reader have access to all these clues that you can kind of like be piecing together. But like there's also all this maneuvering that's happening and like living and life that's happening too. With this group of characters too, so it's not like they are locked in a room and they all have to figure this out right now. It's like they're kind of free to go about with their business and they're
Yeah.
trying to figure it out as like this thing on the side of everything else they're doing. It's just a very unique take on, I think, that style of story that I don't think I've seen that anywhere else. Yeah, so I don't know, it's good.
Huh,
I
that
recommend
sounds
it.
really cool.
Yeah.
So hey, shall we jump into our topic?
Yes. Yeah, can you read it again for us just so we remember?
Yeah. So how do you handle aging and age differences? And I guess just the topic, just the topic of age generally in your
Hmm.
games. And
Yeah.
so here is when I put this on the table. Like here's what I kind of had in mind. I don't have an agenda for this conversation. I
Hmm.
want to see where it goes. But
Yeah.
like, so you and I think have both run Detective Kids type of games or
Hmm.
played in them. You and I have both run and played in plenty of games where I think the heroes are all sort of like 20 something action heroes,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Have you ever run or played in a game where you or one of the players had a character who is where their age was mechanically important, was
Mm.
had a mechanical effect on the game, or just where their age had a strong role playing effect on the game?
Yeah, we were. Let's see. I think it was a Blades in the Dark game that I was playing, and one of the characters, yeah, one of the characters they were playing was like, kind of like a mother or grandmotherly figure,
Hmm.
and like that came up quite a bit as a fun role playing, like kind of a yeah fun role playing thing. I cannot remember the character's name. But yeah, so that was a really fun thing. And they also like did a lot of like baking as well in the game. So in in Blades, right, there's this you can if you want to, there's like the whole like ghost field in there too, like
Yeah.
so you can see ghosts and stuff. So that character could see ghosts and
Oh, nice.
part of that I think was like their baking gave them access to that too, which
Huh.
was a really really fun detail. Yeah, but it's yeah, it doesn't come up a lot, and I think it's because like it is it can be an uncomfortable topic, right? About
For
like
sure.
aging, but I mean, there's a lot there too. Like I think the most I've done with this is having like retired adventurers in town as like NPCs and
Hmm.
stuff. And it's like, well, I mean, you can't really recruit this person because they're retired. Like they're not going back. Like they were a level 5 or level 10 fighter at one point in their life, but no longer. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of fun to I think have some of that in there. But I'm also trying to think now about like, like how would I even play like an aging elderly,
Yeah.
fighter? Like would there be mechanical disadvantages or would it just be yeah, flavor on top like role playing?
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I feel like most of the systems I've seen that have mechanics for age, the older, if you are playing a quote older character here, and define older, I guess, by whatever species or
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
you're playing, right?
Yeah.
Your physical stats take some kind of a hit, but sometimes they they toss you a little bonus to some mental stats, right?
Mhm.
Like your wisdom is higher, but your strength is lower or something.
Yeah.
Like what I That's pretty straightforward. Where my mind goes is just thinking about I am about to hit like 50, so I'm an old man.
Oh, yes,
And
ancient.
yeah, and just just thinking about myself at age 20 versus myself at age 50, like we're
Mhm.
the same person but dramatically different. Like, so an adventure hook that works for a gang of 22-year-olds
Mhm.
would be radically different than like an adventure hook that convinces a bunch of 48-year-olds, right, to
Yes.
take action, right? So like
Yeah.
your 45-year-old fighter will have the goblins have captured the water mill outside town. 22-year-olds are going to want to go and kill the goblins.
Yeah.
Maybe your 45-year-olds are going to be like, how can we resolve this in a
Yes.
long-term way, right? That doesn't
Yes.
disrupt, the economics of the town, right?
Yeah,
So
that doesn't
I'm
get
being a
me and
little
my friends
facetious with that.
killed. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So like I feel like if you want to really play into it, your game would, if you really are going to be role playing people from different age brackets,
Hmm.
it's a lot. It would be more fun, but maybe more of a hassle if you go beyond just like, oh yeah, I have -2 constitution but plus
Hmm.
2 wisdom. Any thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah, no, a lot of thoughts. Yeah, it is interesting because I think like yeah, real world 50-year-olds would definitely approach that problem very very differently. I mean, probably they would find a bunch of 22-year-olds to send
Yeah,
send over
yeah,
to deal with the goblins, right? But like I mean that's also that is a solution. I mean, it just sort of it gets down to again I think like your system and sort of what the system wants you to do. Like I mean, I think if you're playing yeah, right, if you're supposed to go do combat, like you're going to go do combat. But like yeah,
right,
maybe
right, right.
approaching a little differently. I mean, I think it's like it is fun to think about it from a player motivation side. Something we've talked about before on the podcast is the thought of like your heroes having family back home, you know, that like like that's the reason they're adventuring, right?
Yeah,
And it's sort of easier to think about like the 50 some person having family back home versus like yeah the 20-year-old. It's like you know they're unencumbered by everything, like maybe
yeah.
their parents died in some sort of like you know crash and they've got a cool scar and it's like you know it's like so it's like they're the lone wolf, but like yeah thinking about someone that has roots and stuff like their motivation for adventuring is going to be quite a bit different. um yeah.
And
Oh
they,
god.
just their assessment of like risk and
Mhm.
reward is going to be different,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like if you're playing a whatever, if you're playing an 18-year-old D&D fighter, I mean, they think they can't die.
Yes.
Like, right? I mean,
Yes.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
whereas if you're playing a 45-year-old, their joints have started aching and like
Hmm.
they're and they are thinking about like the if I win this fight but I whatever, I get
Yeah.
hit and I get infected or something like that, that's going to like
Hmm.
there's a whole category of things that like different age brackets just won't prioritize as much, and like
Yeah.
your 18-year-old is not going to prioritize like the long-term effects of what's going on here,
Yeah.
or and they're not going to take like danger to themselves as seriously as someone else.
Yeah.
So
I saw, I saw some stat yesterday, and like I'm gonna get all the details wrong, but the general idea of it is I think instructive. It was like after the age of 40, like 90% of people like will never run ever again, something like that, right? Like I mean, again,
yeah,
it doesn't really matter. Like it's just the thought of like I don't know, like all the stuff that you sort of take for granted that young people do. Like you know, we've both got kids, right? Like they're always like running, they're jumping off of stuff all the time
yeah,
and like think about like when's the last time you just like got up on the couch and jumped off of it as high as you could just to sort of see what would happen. It's like you just like at a certain point in your life you're like I don't do that anymore. You know like,
right, right, right,
yeah and it's not like I'm sure it'd still be super fun to do and everything, but it's just like yeah you're thinking about like well if I roll my ankle or like you know I break
yeah,
the couch or you know that sort of stuff that just doesn't occur to a 4-year old
yes,
at all. Yeah, so I mean I think there's that element of it. I think that part might be sort of hard it'd be hard to gamify. I mean, like, yeah, you can definitely role play it, and it's just sort of something you
yeah,
remind. Yeah, the the player would have to get into that. I am thinking about like now about how could you bring in some of those bonds and those relationships, like those intergenerational relationships, into the party itself. So, like, I
hmm,
mean, just like the obvious one is like it would be fascinating to run a game where like grandfather father and son were all like you know on an
yeah,
adventuring road together. Everybody's kind of playing a different person in that, and it's like thinking about how that group would be looking out for each other and like aware of each other's age in a different way that it would be than if you just had an adventuring party and it's like and there was one random person who was like 80 in there, right? It's like
yeah, yeah,
yeah, you have those kind of familial bonds. I think that would be it'd be very different. It'd be like I don't know, maybe grandpa still is like a really good shot with a bow and arrow, but you're not going to have him be the one to first climb the mountain or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's an interesting idea.
Thinking of bonds with other PCs, like so, I'm the parent of I guess now two teenagers, one
Wow.
older one and one younger one.
Yeah.
And like if you had some sort of bond system or relationship system that was mechanically represented, even that would have to just function differently for people in different ages, right?
Hmm.
If a 50-year-old gets insulted, like, you get insulted by a party member, maybe your relationship meter goes down by with that person by 2.
Hmm.
But like a teenager, the relation gets insulted, or their feelings are hurt, and like that relationship meter is going to go down by 30,
Yeah,
right?
it goes
Like
down to whatever negative number is possible.
right,
Yeah,
exactly. Like
yeah,
so like in a lot of ways, just like I mean, just think of the intensity of like emotion and relationships and stuff like that in
hmm
youth. Like, I mean, I just marvel this looking at my own kids
hmm
and trying to remember what that was like.
yeah,
In some ways, the rules of the universe just are just different for you at
yeah,
one end of the age spectrum versus the other.
yeah. It's like you almost want to have to make them. Yeah, it's like you almost want to have like people have to make like a reaction score, like just a general like how much did this get to you,
Yeah.
get to your roll, and it's like that. Yeah, that range of like say you're playing a teenager, it's like this is going to y- you're going to roll an extra d8 for everything. And then also roll again, flip a coin, and it's like if it's positive,
Right.
you
Yeah.
add 8, and if it's negative, you subtract 8. Or like what?
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah,
There's
the
always like a 20% chance that you'll just detonate the relationship. Like,
yes, yeah, yeah,
but think also of like, think of like making a persuade roll. Whatever, you meet the cultist, and the cultist makes a persuade roll against your PC. Your PC
yeah,
is 18 years old. That cultist should have like a plus 10 bonus
hmm
to their persuade roll,
yeah,
right? I
yeah,
mean, think of the first time someone told you about like objectivism in college, right?
yes,
You were
yeah,
like, "Oh my goodness, this is incredible. Tell me more." And
yeah,
like,
yeah.
if someone came in and tried to tell you about it now, you'd be like, "Please,
Please shut up.
please, I've heard it. Go away."
Yes,
Right?
yeah,
Uh, I mean, you could get lost in all of the detail, but like, it just
mm,
makes me think, like, what would the fun mechanical levers be? What levers would be the most fun to like
hmm
tweak based on age?
yeah. Yeah, I think the if just to actually answer that question, I think the things that'd be fun to tweak, I think would be sort of those. I mean, like almost going back to what we were talking about earlier about like all the social skills,
Yeah.
right? Like just the general adeptness at like maybe navigating some of those, but then also like yeah, also just tweaking like the strength and acrobatic skills as well, right? Because yeah,
Yeah.
you get older, you just can't do stuff like that. I mean, I guess I would like to think that I am, like a little bit smarter and keener in those sorts of things in my thinking as I get older. But I'm sure at some point, but I'm sure that's not 100% true. But then also, I'm sure at some point it starts to decline again. As you get even older than
Yeah.
that too. Yeah, so it's like yeah, again that like that maybe that grandfather grandparent figure in that party. It's like yeah, like maybe there's a lot of detriments there, but there's a couple things that are pretty high as well. Yeah, but I mean, I think most of the games that I played, so it doesn't matter whatever fantasy, race you're playing. It's like everybody sort of just chooses whatever the 20 to 30
Yeah.
something ish
Yep.
version of
The
that
like
is. Yeah.
movie hero age
Yeah.
version of your character, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The movie hero version. Yeah. And so it's like, so we just often like kind of sidestep it. You're right. Or you also just like, yeah, you're like, I don't really want to take a disadvantage here. Um, that said, like I'm thinking about like when I play like say the Dark Souls games, like again, let's talk about video games. I'm
Yeah.
finding lately that I'm often choosing, and this is just like a totally cosmetic thing. I often just choose like the old person in
Oh,
there because
interesting.
it's just sort of fun for me to think about. It's like, well, I mean,
Yeah.
you're kind of a fantasy hero anyway, so like why not be able to still cast fireballs and, and swing
Yeah.
swords
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Yeah, but also be yeah super old. Like yeah, so that's fun. Yeah, I had one other thing that I wanted to bring up because I know we need to wrap up. Oh yes, it was The Hobbit, right? So
Yeah.
going back to Chris's The Hobbit corner. So we're
We
watching.
need like a little theme
Yeah.
song for this section of the podcast.
It's just Leonard Nimoy singing like Bilbo, Bilbo Baggins. Yeah, the like so I love the dwarves have a huge like intergenerational like gap in them too, right?
Oh
And like
yeah.
even like Thorin does call out at certain points like this is a job for Feely and Keely, right? Because they're the young the young people, right? They're not going to get super tired for this, and like right, and there's jobs that are just for Balin and like all that
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. So like I enjoyed that, and what's been fun is so I'm watching the movies with my daughter, and she correctly like clocked who Feely and Keely were when they showed up.
Oh,
Like, so I
interesting.
didn't think that. I mean, she enjoyed reading the book. I was like, I don't know if she caught any details or whatever. But like, we're
Yeah.
watching the movie, and she's like, "Oh, that's Feely and Keely" before they introduce themselves. It's like, how did you know that? She's like, "Oh, because they're the young ones." Like, and she
Oh. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like,
interesting.
huh, okay. Like, yeah, so it's also something where it might just be sort of wherever you're at in life too, you might notice some of those differences
Yeah.
differences as well. But, all right. Yeah. Like I said, we need to wrap up. You got any other kind of last parting thoughts on this?
No, I don't think so. Just
Mm.
to say, this is definitely the sort of topic where I think we don't really have
Mhm.
the answers, and it
Yeah.
doesn't sound like either of us is really engaged with this.
Yeah.
But as always is the case with these conversations, it makes me want to pull this into a future game that I run.
Yeah.
So if you like, this is something where I would really value hearing from listeners from, actually. So if you're listening
Mhm.
and you have had some cool experience about this in the context of a role playing game, I'd like to hear about it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, same here. Yeah, I guess my final like kind of parting thought is like now I really want to run a game where all the well, no, my final parting thought is I completely forgot about Brindlewood Bay until this exact moment.
oh
That is a game that leans very heavily on. Oh, I'm so sorry because I'm sure, like Matt, you've probably been, if you're listening to this episode, you've just been screaming at the podcast player the whole time. Brindlewood Bay is a game in which you play elderly women, right? And
yeah,
like that is a huge part of the game is embracing that and like kind of thinking that through. And it's super fun and like super awesome.
yeah.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that is that like a role playing theme that you lean into or you don't, depending on
Mhm.
like your interest in it, or is it like mechanically represented?
Yes,
Like
it's
how
yeah.
does that work?
Yeah, it's more it's definitely like kind of interwoven into the mechanics, right? Like so yeah, you don't have like a I don't know, roundhouse kick stat in that
Yeah.
game at all. Like right, it's very much woven into just the sorts of stories you tell and all yeah, and all manner of stuff. I mean, even down to sort of like all your special moves in that game
Hmm.
are all based on sort of TV shows that you would have watched when you were younger, right? So
Hmm.
it's like, yeah, it's just like it's woven into it, and it's really cool and it's really neat, and it's the sort of thing where it's like, yeah, like thinking about that in this conversation, like I want there to be more of that because I think as us gamers get older, we're going to want to have different ways to interact with our games. So having more sort of like ability to tell stories at different ages is always going to be a good thing. So we're not just always having to default to like I don't know. I've been playing a 25-year-old fighter for my whole my whole life. Like at some point, like
Yeah.
you want to play games that I think represent parts of who you are and your personality. Yeah. So like I'm hoping when I'm 80 years old, I can play the 80-year-old fighter, and there's like a compelling mechanic around that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Cool. All right. Well, that
Okay.
does it for us. Yeah. So we've been Roll for Topic. We're part of the Roll for It podcasting media network. Our sister show, The Splat Book with John and Jess and Ben, is great. I just listened to a recent episode where John and Ben were sort of let off leash, and they got to just kind of talk and, and gab about games and owning things and like yeah, playing games and like it was a really good wide ranging conversation. I find myself just appreciating them so much, and I just like get so much out of them just like thinking very hard about these like details of the hobby. Yeah, so
Yeah.
definitely go listen to them at thesplatbook.com, and then also go check out Andy and John at Zombie Strains. It's good, they keep going. Andy, what's your next movie that you've got coming up?
The next movie, the next, I think it will have come out by the time this our episode here goes live. Is it Revenge of the Zombies? It might be
That
Revenge of
sounds
the
right.
Zombies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sure sounds like a zombie movie. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a great podcast. I mean, we were chatting, we got to see each other in person, and you were telling us about one of the recent ones that you watched. And it's just like,
Yeah.
man, you're going so deep into it. It's super fun. And I fear that you're never gonna be able to enjoy a movie ever again.
It has done permanent damage, yes, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, that does it for us. I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
And remember, if your player's having fun, you're a great GM.